Well, I've been mainly working in acrylics for the past few months. I've done one or two other paintings using pastel and mixed media and so on. And I did this one, this drawing, for a demonstration I was going to do with pastel and water, but decided to change the subject to be more suitable for the technique I was going to give them at that time. I still got it here, and it's on a hot pressed £140 smooth paper. I thought I would use the Russian paints to have a quick go at doing a fairly loose watercolour and show how this scene can be done with watercolour, because I haven't done watercolour for a while. And after this I'm going to do an even looser one in a different style again. It's not going to be built up in a more traditional style, but I'm going to be doing a much looser scene of a street scene, just to have a chance at different mediums again and use some different ways of working. It might refresh us a bit, eh? Here we are stuck inside in the conservatory with all this coronavirus going on, so we're having to wait. See what the lottery of life brings along for us. Who's going to catch it, who isn't, how long we're going to be stuck in here, how long we're going to be held back from going to France and so on. It could be months rather than weeks by the sound of it, which is very depressing. In the meantime, make the most of it. See if we get a bit of plein air work occasionally, if I can find somewhere quiet to get away in. I've got the garden here and the flowers are about to come out as well, so we'll be doing a bit of painting in the garden as well in the next few weeks, I'm sure. Using this set of the Sony watercolours. My set of brushes here. Nice set of all different brushes for different types of use, from swords to rakes to hakes to rounds and flats and all sorts for different uses. On a piece of sponge as well if I need it. And I'm going to put out some masking fluid as well, because I've got a feeling there's going to be some highlights in this which are going to need to mask as well. My Russian paints, the Sonets, a bit of tissue paper, some paper just to mix the colours on, just to test them, water. And we're about there. And then of course the lovely bright scene itself. And it's amazing how even the printing can make things so different, how this one is much stronger than this one. Now I haven't got masking fluid for this at the moment. I could use a wax candle even to do the white areas, but I'm going to just try and leave them behind, and I'll go back in with some white gouache or some white paint at the end of it all. Normally I would take these light areas, these white areas here, and I would mask them out, these little lines and so on, but I'm going to put them in later. So let's get straight on, and the brush I'm going to use is going to be my favourites, my large oval mop, which is a beautiful brush for this sort of work, and we'll work our way down through the sky into the background here, so leaving the lights behind. What I'm going to do first is just wet my paints, put a little bit of water over each. Right, let's put a little wash of this on to start with, and get water under the paper just so I get a nice even wash into this, leaving the white clouds behind here just a little bit. So I'm leaving some dry bits of paper, the dry bits for the sharper edges of the white cloud. I'm going to work back upwards in this case and then come down again. I'm going to take my turquoise here, and remember that watercolour dries lighter than the colour that first goes on. Just try and leave the white in between here, so it will dry lighter than we first put it on. So we want to make it seems a bit strong at the moment, it's not going to be later. You can see getting some slightly harder edges here and there as I go up here. Easier to work down perhaps than up. And then I'm going to make that colour a little bit stronger, and I'm going to come down from above, really quite strong here, and let that flood down the paper here into this area of the clouds. Just bring that down and let it just blend into the blue down below, and look how quick and easy that was. Let me get this lovely effect. Now I've got the paper slightly tilted so that one bit of the paint is going to run into the other. Let me get this nice, slightly variegated wash of colour. Nice and even there. And there's our sky done in almost one foul swoop. Now, just to get those cloud effects, I'm going to come back with some clean water and just let that clean water come down into the, just soften the edges and let that come down softly into here. There we go. Instant sky, quick as that, nice and fresh. Wants to be on lovely and fresh, don't want to touch it again. Whilst we've got those colours on the brush, let's come down to the water and do exactly the same thing here with the water. Well, almost the same thing. We'll come in with the brush, just clean water right up into here, into these areas, leaving anything that's white behind. Right up and through down here. And we're going to paint wet into wet and wet next to wet at first here, and as the paint dries it will become sharper edged. In other words, if I paint wet on dry it'll be a sharp edge. If I paint wet on wet it'll become a soft edge. If I paint wet next to wet it will bleed into the colour next to it. So we come all the way down here with this water just to get my soft effects of wet into wet. To come up with that, I'm going to soften that edge there a little bit as well when I'm at it. Just bring that down to those trees a fraction. Got a white building up there, that's it. Now down here then, I'm going to not just go across, I'm going to use the same colours as we did in the sky, but coming downwards with my strokes a bit more. So we get a variegated feeling of these reflections, and the light colours of the mask coming down in between here. And the way along there. So my verticals first and my horizontals afterwards. Let's get these lovely verticals coming in here with this turquoise, beautiful turquoise colour. So verticals first. I haven't got wind going across the water here, so I haven't got to worry about that too much. I'm going to start doing a few horizontals to get the feeling of the reflections of the water. Look how we can get that right down to here, all the way through here. And I'm making my paint thicker and thinner. In other words, I'm using the paint more thinly in some places and thicker in others. More pigment in it, in other words. Get the feelings of these reflections while it's still, I've got to do this while it's still wet. I'll put a bit of green into it now, up into here. Just going down here with a bit of the green. Get the more turquoisey green feel in here of these trees from above actually. Just down into there, let's get that feeling there. It's very, very wet at the moment. I want that stronger blue coming in down here. I'll let that come down. I'm mainly painting in the vertical now, the horizontal I mean now, just coming right into here and letting one colour come into another, leaving that white boy there. Right down there through here, leaving that area a bit. So I want to get all of these colours in here. There's a bit more of that turquoise going on down here. Right down through there, into the boats. I'm going to come back into those boats in a minute. Let's just get these effects of thick and thin paint going on down here. That stronger blue again down here that comes right up into here. While it's still wet we can get these beautiful effects, look. And as I said, the paper is slightly tilted so I can and we'll just let that flow in here. Some of that slightly deeper blue coming up into the background here. That slightly deeper ultramarine here coming along, right the way along there. And some of that coming down in the reflections again the same. Let's get this lovely feeling of reflections. The beauty of watercolour, the beauty of this transparency of the watercolour that can only be attained with watercolour really. And we'll just bring some of those lines through there just to break it up and get the feeling of these. This is a smooth paper, this is a hot press paper. If we had a textural paper we could do a lot more with the texture now. Right through here. Now while it's still very wet, again I can start to build up these beautiful reflections here, and I can let them spread in down here, look. Get the feeling of the light coming through before I go back in with my deeper colours. These are my lighter colours that I'm leaving behind. I'm going to work up deeper and deeper and deeper into here. A bit more of the turquoise coming down into here, that lovely blue-green turquoise right through in here. Just using the paint a little bit more thickly now to get these lovely greens coming right down through, quite heavily down in there. And I'd say because it's still wet, they're blending back in again. Great fun. Bits of that green coming right up through into here in the background, down and round and through here. If I want these to be harder edged, then I'm going to have to, or sharper edged, so I'm going to have to wait till it dries a bit more. Don't have to do that at the moment. We'll just let it blend in at the moment here. Right through back into there, right up into there. While it's still wet, these lovely deep blues back up in here. Right up amongst the boats. As it's drying, it's spreading less. As the paint dries, then this paint I'm putting on is blending in and spreading out less, gradually. So it's all to do with timing. You can teach somebody to paint with watercolours, with oils, with acrylics, but the watercolour in particular is something that somebody has to feel. You have to actually practice it a lot more yourselves to get the feel of how long it takes to dry, of how much paint to put on, of how wet it's going to be. Now let's go to a much deeper green. And we'll start painting this deeper green in down here. Let that come in there, beautiful deep green. And one colour against another here, so this deep green is now playing against the turquoise a bit more. Right up into there. While it's still wet, so that it doesn't spread out too far, just building up these beautiful colours here. You see now as the paint's drying a bit more, my colours are not spreading as far out, are they? Great fun to do. I haven't done a watercolour for a while. I don't do so many now because they're not so commercially viable. People tend to want the acrylics more. They're ready to go on the wall, where the watercolours nearly always have to be mounted, framed, whatever. We go darker and darker. I want to go into a little bit of the deep purple here. I want to get some more warmth into that water, especially around here as it's reflecting the. So I'm using almost an alizarin now into here, a purple alizarin, just to get the feeling of the red reflections happening down into the water, the depth of the water here. And finally in that water, there's these dark bits up here, we'll just get these little bits of dark. There we go. I'll get a little bit more of the red, just a touch of the red from the side of the boat, just reflecting into these a little bit, just very dark, just into here. There we go. And that's our water just about done there. Now we've got to be patient and let that dry off. And I might come back in with a little bit more detail here and there. I might even lift some of this out a bit. Bring that down there and around here. We might just lift out a bit here and there. As that's drying down, let's go back to our background. And we'll look at the trees back here. To do that, I'm going to take some fairly light green, warm emerald, and go right the way through that up to here with that. Nice and quick, nice and clean. Wherever it is, it's on my brush now. I'm going to put it on. A bit like the jigsaw method of painting that I was telling you about earlier. Now into that we want to get the slightly deeper, cooler greens. So we'll take some of that turquoise from earlier and we'll just start to drop that in. And let the controlled accident of the paint spreading out do the work for us. So wet into wet, and we'll just let that spread out. A little bit warmer now, so I'm going to take a wee bit of raw sienna and we'll drop some of that warmth in. making those trees up a wee bit warmer. So a little lesson in something different today with the watercolour. The Sonny Russian paints, they're not too expensive, about £12 to £18 depending on where you get them from, whether you send to Russia for them or whether you get them over here. Right up to these darks under the building here, which will make it seem lighter. And we'll start to bring some of those greens in between the boats here, just to feel the lights of the boats. Pop them out of fraction. An impression of it. We're still doing an impressionist painting even though it's watercolour. We're still working a very impressionist style. And some of the darker areas just coming in while it's still damp down there. We can do this. There we go. Now this is drying off, so I'll be able to do some more detailed work there in a moment. Let's come back up into this this area. The boats themselves perhaps even now. Let's have a look at the washes on that. If I want to use some of that blue-green wash just to get the feel of the boat here. It's very white there. I'll just bring this reflection into here, the water. Here I can do the same, I can just blend that in, let the water come over there a bit. Little line underneath that. There, there's a shadow. In one go if we can. A little bit darker there. A bit more mauve and plus a tad of green into that. So I'm keeping the whole painting fluid and moving at the moment. Let's take a look now at what's going on back here. Some lovely warm colours happening back in here. Right down to the boats there. So I'm using some yellow, deep yellow now to just find some of these stronger colours, warmer colours in the background. I'm going to get this colour down here, which is quite an awkward one. We'll start off with some medium yellow down there and give it a wash of that. We'll drop some colour in. One quick wash of medium yellow all the way down both of these. Get a bit more blue in there. And I need to drop that same blue down into the yellow. A little bit too blue there. A bit more purple into it, just a little bit of purple into it down here. The sunshine coming across, and we'll just let those colours work into each other there, right down through here. I'll get this stronger in just a moment. Just want to get the feeling of wood there at the minute. And then we'll paint more detail in a moment. It should be dark in between there anyway. That's that, quick as that. So I'm going to start off with my lovely strong turquoise over here, right round there. The whole thing there, first of all, to lose that a bit, because I'm going to go over that with white again in a minute. Let's not worry too much about that for the moment. There we go, that's got my light turquoise in there. I want to come back with a stronger, more cerulean to here. Shall come downward. These beautiful blues, which we can get in watercolour, and the very dark bits to make these seem stronger need to go in when it's dry. Can't put those in now, I've got to let it dry off a bit. almost single strokes if we can. So I go down to a smaller brush for my details towards the end. Get all of these bigger bits in first. Take that same madder red and we'll just bring some of the warmth under here a bit more. Over that, so we're overlaying one colour. Now this is now called a glaze when I'm putting a colour, a thin colour over an already existing colour that we put on earlier. So that's called a glaze. I'm going to start to use heavier, darker paint to bring out the shadows between the boats here. Nice light, lively watercolour. Backing up the top here where the shadows are. Take my madder and little ultramarine and we'll just start to find some of these darker details in, just a feeling of detail anyway. I can start to put shadows over here. You see now that the paint has dried, I can paint harder edge details over the top here to get the feeling of the edge of this wall. How are the colours, by leaving the light colours behind, how we gradually bring these darker colours up. I think I've just about used up my larger brushwork now. So we'll let that dry off and I'm going to get a little square brush and go back on these windows. Right, so little square windows, little square brush. Ultramarine, madder mix to make these darker windows and just feel them into here. Don't want to use a round brush for square hole, just to indicate all these windows back here. And where there's purer colour we will use it. So if that blue gets stronger there, then I'll make it a stronger blue there. Now whilst I've got the square brush in my hand, I should be able to come in and look at these lovely blues on here. What's that wavy line there? This is where we can start to play with the details a bit more. But we can't be totally impressionist now, we've got to start feeling. We can still drop one colour into another. I'll take some of that deep green now and just drop it in down there to get the reflection of the colour into there. To get these lovely light oranges going and reds. Let's start on those now. We'll start off by using some of the deep yellow into here. It's a little bit dark, but it'll be alright. And I want to get a very bright red on these lines here, so I'm going to use some medium yellow first to go in and then bring my red back into that afterwards. And that comes all the way through here too. Okay, back to my light red now, which is a lovely colour. And let's see if we can pick up on these lovely, make it a bit thinner. I want to get it a bit thinner there, so it's a much brighter red. Now this is painting the red over the yellow so that I get a lovely bright orange red rather than it being too dark. Get a wonderful bright red that way rather than just painting it straight onto the paper, which doesn't make it as bright, I don't think. Sometimes dropping one colour into another can also give you a much brighter colour than mixing it and putting it on. Anywhere else where it is now, we've got to put it in. So at the end of this one here and here, up into the shops behind here. Now, I'm talking about reflections and how I'm going to now take some of this red and come back and just wave it into here a little bit over the top. If I wanted it much brighter, I would have to have left lighter areas from the very beginning, but I don't want it much brighter. I'm happy with it as it is. Totally different green than the other greens, so that means that it's going to make the other greens stand out cooler, or we can start playing the differences in colours. So now we're just working down to our last, working towards our last darks now. I might come back in with a bigger brush to get some of these reflections in a bit more in a minute. But so watercolours don't have to be very grey and insipid and yucky. They can be quite bright and vibrant. You don't have to paint watercolours. As Ron Ranson once said, he got fed up with watercolours doing things like having a piece of gauze over something. So we've got a lovely little loose watercolour there now, and it's just a matter of how far we wish to take it. How dark you want to go with the darks, because just by putting in darks into various places now we can really start to make this sing a bit with the lights against the darks. Now we can start to get the feeling of the ripples on top here a bit more by making these deeper tones down into here. There we go. Right, now there's some stronger bits down here I want to get in. There's a dark, lovely dark going down here between these two. That needs to go in there. There we go. Now I want to come back into these darks just a little bit more. Pick up my big wash again. And let's get some lovely, really deep purple blue going. And just work in these final shadows and ripples here. Bring out some of the highlights that we didn't have sharply with masking fluid and see if that can make a difference. I would have preferred to have used masking fluid because I get a much sharper white mark here than I'm getting this way. But even so, it's still working. So it's not something I prefer doing. I prefer to have masking fluid. It's a lot fresher and you can see where I've got the very light areas here. Now let's take a rigging brush and see if we can use the rigging brush to get some of these very fine light masks in the background here. And we can even use the white with a bit of watercolour to make lighter colours like that again. Don't think I need to do a lot more because I've shown you the basics of doing a traditional little watercolour here now. Just a few of the darks here and there just to tidy up the shadows. I don't want them to show too much as opaque, that's the problem, as they tend to do when they're like this, when you haven't left them in. I'd have put those in with masking fluid, you see, that was the point. Well, there we are then, something a little different for you again, and a little watercolour this time of Cassis Harbour in France. One I had prepared ready to do pastel and water with, but I just thought I'd show you how we can work the ordinary watercolours, the Russian paints, onto this hot press smooth paper.